I really don't know where to start, but I feel that God wants me to share it. Every time I have tried to write it, I start to cry because it is as fresh in my mind today as if it was yesterday. It is the most emotional thing that has ever happened to me in my whole life. First, let me tell you a little about who I am. I am a white male, 57 years of age. I live in Georgia in the U.S. I am married. My wife's name is Ann. We have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, 1 on the way, and 2 great-grandchildren, and 1 on the way. I am medical retired, but don't like retirement. Leading up to 1991 I had not been feeling very good, real tired, couldn't sleep, and my arm would hurt and get numb, and would get really short of breath. I thought it was because I smoked and was getting older. My wife has been driving a school bus for 28 years, she was on her bus route at the time. I was at home in the backyard. We had an old truck to pull our camper to our lot at a lake in Alabama. The paint was faded, so a friend of ours had painted it inside and out. I was in the yard putting the sun visors on when I started to feel sick at my stomach. I started to sweat, and had bad cramping in my chest and down my arm. Like most people who smoke, I thought if I would sit down and smoke it would go away. Boy, was I wrong. About that time my wife drove up in her bus. She parked and walked over to where I was sitting. The first thing she said, "What is wrong? You are as pale as cotton." Not wanting to worry her, I said I would be okay in a little while. She asked again, "Do you want me to call 911, or her to carry me to the hospital?" She opened the back door and started in the house. I got up, started to follow her in. I got just inside the door when it seemed like someone took a veil and cut off all my air. I went to my knees, fell over on my back. It felt like 6 elephants got in the middle of my chest at one time. That's when I knew I was in bad trouble. Ann turned and called 911. I told her I thought I was having a heart attack. She in turn told 911 what I said. She told them to hurry. I then asked her to call my friend Grady. He is the one who painted my truck. I knew he had some nitroglycerin tablets for his heart. He was there before the EMTs with the tablets. I put 2 under my tongue but didn't get any relief. About that time the EMTs arrived. I told them I couldn't breathe, and was hurting real bad in my chest. They cut my shirt off me, hooked me to a monitor, then said I was having a massive heart attack, and was throwing blood clots. About that time, I saw my wife had completely lost it. I started to get a funny feeling that I had never felt before. I look up at my friend Grady and the EMT and said, "I'm going to die." I told Grady to tell the children to look after Ann, and tell them I love them all. Then my body started to feel like your foot had gone to sleep all over, everything started to turn gray colored, and I had the most peaceful feeling I have ever had in my life. Everything went black, it seemed like, for just a minute. The next thing I knew, I was floating above the EMTs watching them work on me. They gave me shots in the arm, in the heart, and then started to shock my heart with the paddles. After they had shocked me twice, I watched my sprite float out of my body. I live in a 2-story house. All of a sudden, there wasn't a top on it. I started to float up higher. I could see everybody that was in the house, and outside. When my friend Grady saw I had died, he ran outside and was holding on to my truck, throwing up. I could see him as plain as day. My wife and had to be held by friends who had ran over. The EMTs was still working on me. They had to call in for a backup crew because of my full arrest. The second crew ran in with a new set of paddles, which was charged and ready. I never had any fear of dying through all of this. All of a sudden, I started into a tunnel. It was very narrow, and at the other end was the most beautiful light I had ever seen. It seemed like I was going 100 miles an hour head first. The light was getting closer all of the time. It was so bright, but it didn't hurt my eyes. Then I went into the light just as if you would jump into a swimming pool. I was completely covered by the light. Out of the middle for the light came a voice. It said everything would be all right. I have never felt such peace. There was no pain, and the love I felt there was so great there are no enough word in the world to tell you how great it was. I somehow knew it was God. He said, "You must go back, your wife is not handling it very well." He said, "Look down below and you can see her." I looked down below and I could see everything that was happening in our house. Ann was a total wreck. As much as I love her, I turned and said, "God, I don't want to go back. God, I have never felt so much love and peace on earth as I felt here." He said, "Come on in and I will show you heaven, but then you will have to go back. I have work I need you to do on earth." What God showed me that day, there are not enough word on earth to tell you, but I will do my best with what words I have. There was the most beautiful gate, where we saw my parents, grandparent who had died a long time ago. One person I didn't know, but he told me he loved me too. They all said they are fine, and would wait for me to come back. We went on in. It seemed like everything was in a room, but you could see forever. You would be in one place, then in a second you was somewhere else. There was so much to see, the clearest rivers and streams. The water was crystal clear. The sky was so blue, the grass so green, when you walked in the grass you didn't leave footprints. The most beautiful music you have ever heard. The flowers were the most beautiful I had ever seen. I didn't see any person who was sick, or crippled, or looked unhappy. They told me I was dead for 3 to 4 minutes, but in heaven time seemed to stand still. It seemed like I had been there for 3 or 4 months. Then God turned my hand loose, and then said, you must go back for a while, after your work is done you can come back. About that time, I was going back through the same tunnel just as fast as I went. The next thing I knew I was looking the EMT in the face, and saw my grandson who lives next door. He was about 4 years old at the time. He had wandered into the room during the excitement. I looked at them and said, I left you for a while, didn't I? He said, fight with us, not against us, we are trying to keep you here. I still had no fear of death after 23 shots, and shocked 3 times, I was on my way to the hospital. One of the EMTs told my brother-in-law not to get in a hurry getting to the hospital. I wouldn't make to the hospital alive. They didn't even stop at the little hospital in our town, but carried me to a trauma center in Georgia. I was barely alive when we arrived. A great doctor was on call that day, but the first person I saw was an old friend who was a nurse there at the time. She said, I couldn't image it was you when they call in to talk to the doctor. She said when they would call in on the radio while they were en route here, they gave your name and address, I knew it was you. They told me not to talk, but I told them to tell me like it really was. I might have something I want to tell my wife and children before I go. The doctor told me it didn't look good at all, he would do everything he could. My wife later told me the doctor told her the only change I had was a shot with a clot-busting drug. The shot cost $3,900 9 years ago. She told them not to tell me what it cost, that I was so tight with money I would have another heart attack. The family still kids me about it to this day. They gave me the shot, and then put me in the CCU unit. They let my wife and children come and go anytime they want to, because they didn't think I would make it. On about the 7th day the doctor told me they needed to do a heart catheter in order to see how much damage was done, and see if there was anything they could do to help me. I was 95% in the main artery that feeds the left side of the heart, and several blockages that were not quite as bad. The next day they did what they called a rotor-rooter to remove the blockages as best as they could. They told my wife and I after the catheter, I had lost between 25% to 33%, or a little more than that of the lower left side of my heart. After I had the rotor-rooter done I was placed back in CCU. I had the sweetest nurse, but she seemed so sad and had tears in her eyes when she was around me. The next day she said a EMT that work on you said you could tell me what I would to know more than anything in this world. I asked her what it was. She said, I know you don't need to be talking, just listen to what I have to say before you answer. He told me her 8-year-old son had died 3 months before with brain cancer, and she wanted to know what it is like where he went. The EMT told her he knew I could tell her because of what I said to him when they got me back. I just lay there not knowing what to say. If I told her, people would think I was crazy or had brain damage. She began to cry, which broke my heart. Then I began to cry too. Today, after I have had time to think about it, God had to have took over that day. All of a sudden, I started to tell the whole story. We both cried the whole time. Then she said I could live with it knowing how it is in heaven. She hugged me and said, I will never forget you, thanks so much. I also believe God sent her to look after me while I was in CCU. She watched over me as if she was my mother. I came home a little later in the week. It was a slow road to recovery. I told very few people about my trip in the last 9 years, knowing they would think I was crazy. I was also very confused trying to figure out what God want me to do for him. In the last 9 years, I shared this with people the doctor told they were going to die soon. Afterward they would tell me the fear of dying is the not knowing what it is going to be like. I also have shared it with only Sister Emily before she died with cancer. But I knew where she was going. She was a good, God-fearing woman. She was only 57 years old. She died 2000. No, I am the only one left here other than my children. This has completely changed my outlook on life. I take life one day at a time and live it as if it is my last day. It has softened my heart and I try to help others instead of thinking about myself. I have just finished teaching 33 young people from 13 years of age to 19 in Vacation Bible School, sing in the church choir. I had never written anything more than a letter in my life until last year. Since then I have wrote 12 poems. One about my near-death trip. I try to live my life every day in a way I think will please God, so when my life is over here I can make it back to heaven. If you think I am crazy, that is fine, some will believe, some won't. I hope by sharing this it will help somebody have an easy crossing to the other side when our time comes to die. I would like to take time to thank God for every day, extra days and years he has given me. I would like to thank all of the EMTs who work for County EMS. I would also like to thank the doctors and all the nurses who waited on me. My God bless you all.